Well, hello everybody. I'm Pastor Tim Bees here at First Baptist Church, and I just want to welcome you to our annual Walk Through Black History program. This is our 16th version of this thing. I want to thank Peggy Jackson for all the work that she puts in it, but it's bigger than our church. It's always a collaboration between a number of talents across our community. So it's a great thing that we do. I love Walk Through Black History. It's one of my favorite events that we do here at the church because I'm just illiterate when it comes to black history. And I don't say that flippantly. I really think black history is really important for us to be good citizens. Just like if you're an engineer, you got to take a class, I think it was called material selection, at least if you're going to be a civil engineer. It might not have a direct bearing, but it's really important for you to do your work as an engineer. If you're going to be a medical doctor, you got to take anatomy, okay? I mean, you got to do it. I believe if you're going to be an American citizen, you got to know black history. It is such a unique and important part of our nation's history. It has shaped us more than I think we're aware of. Because it had a significant slavery and the bringing of blacks into this country as slaves had a huge economic impact on us as a nation early on. And then when the slaves were freed and we had Jim Crow, all this stuff, our history has been shaped, formed, has duked, tried to avoid this issue even to this past year, 2020, when we saw the reality of Black Lives Matter. It's just a time for us to be knowledgeable about black history in our country. And look, I think we ought to know about Hispanic history in our country. I think we ought to know about Asian history in our country. I think we ought to know about Native American history in our country. I mean, but I do believe in all my heart that I really think that this black-white issue is significant for us as a nation. It's unlike anything else, anywhere else in any other country. So I just welcome you tonight. It's going to be a great show about Ruby Dee, a wonderful actress that is part of our American heritage. And I'm going to turn this over to our narrator for the night, the Honorable Ernest Jackson. So Ernest, why don't you take it away?
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to our annual Walk Through Black History program. I'm Ernest Jackson. I will be the narrator for this year's program. You know, it's important to just take the time to look back at the messages in our history in order for us to know the right things that will lead us into a better future. So let's get started with our story about Ruby Dee. Ruby Dee was an acclaimed actress and author. She graced the stage and the screen for more than 70 years. She was the first black woman to appear in the American Shakespeare Theater in Stratford, Connecticut. She made several appearances on Broadway before getting national recognition for her role in the film The Jackie Robinson Story. Her acting career crossed all major forms of media, including films such as A Raisin in the Sun, Uptight, Buck and the Preacher, Roots, Do the Right Thing in 1989, and The Delano Sisters, The First 100 Years. Ruby was born on October 27 in Cleveland, Ohio. She was raised in Harlem, New York by her parents. Her birth name was Ruby Ann Wallace. Her parents are Gladys and Marshall Wallace. Marshall was a Pullman porter and a waiter on the Pennsylvania Railroad. Her birth mother and her stepmother were both school teachers. In 1945, Ruby graduated from Hunter College with a degree in Romance languages. She's a member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, but Ruby was deeply committed to her art and to the civil rights movement. Ruby met Ozzy Davis in 1946 when they were cast opposite of each other in the Broadway play called Jeb. They were married in 1948. Dee and Davis's career spanned more than 60 years, As a couple, they crusaded for civil rights, and they proved that there is power in partnership. Ruby Dee and Ozzy Davis served as MCs at the 1963 March on Washington. Davis was a close friend to Malcolm X, and he co-delivered the eulogy with Ahmed Hassan when Malcolm X died. Davis and Dee were very close friends of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Davis delivered a very famous tribute at the memorial in New York Central Park the day after Martin Luther King was assassinated. Ruby Dee stood by his side. In the 1970s, the couple was part of the emerging black independent film movement. The archives reveal that Davis wrote or directed 6 movies, including Cotton Comes to Harlem, The Countdown at Kissimmee in 1976, which was credited as the first American movie shot entirely in Africa by black professionals. Ruby Dee and Ossie Davis received multiple awards. They are members of the NAACP's Image Awards Hall of Fame. They were awarded the National Medal of Arts. They were recipients of the Kennedy Center Honors. In 2007, Davis and Dee tied with former President Jimmy Carter to win a Grammy Award for spoken word for the album titled With Ossie and Ruby in This Life Together. Ruby Dee was a woman, a sister, a wife, an actress, a mother, a grandmother, an activist, a professional, a professor, a poet, a philosopher, and a history maker and a groundbreaker genius. I'm pleased to present to you the legendary Ruby Dee. Ruby, can you tell us what made you decide to write a book and expose yourself to the public?
Well, looking back over one's life can be pretty tricky. It's like going back in time and thinking about people and events and remembering subtleties and attitudes. One should always try to get the facts as straight as possible. However, sometimes facts have little to do with the truth and more to do with how one felt or feels. I guess it just depends on who does the looking back and why. With this in mind, I decided to tell my story. I truly believe that as human beings, we are members of a cosmic orchestra. Each one of us with our own vibrations and sounds, and each one of us a different instrument with something to offer the universe. That is why I, Ruby Ann Wallace Davis, also known as Ruby Dee, decided to share this account of my life. I felt that maybe something that I say or something that I share may be able to help somebody, someone who learns things in peculiar ways. I believe that we were born for a purpose in this world. What we are is part of what we do and vice versa. If we are lucky, we can find out who we are before we decide who we will become. I was lucky, very lucky as a kid, because I was introduced to and engaged in words and ideals at a very early age. Every creature is on this earth for a particular reason. And looking back, even a blind person can see and can have impressions. They can connect the dots and of recognition and make a picture to complete the task at hand. And I have to rely on my family and friends and call on the dead who come to visit me, and even talk to God, who is my higher power so that he can enlighten me.
Tell us a little bit about your childhood.
Well, my parents were teenage parents, and I was their third child. I was informed that I almost did not make it into this world. You see, they had had two before me, a boy when my father was 17 years old and my mother was 15, and then 11 months later, a girl. Then came me. I guess you can say I put a damper on things. Both of my parents had to leave school, and because you know, back in those times when you were pregnant, there was an automatic wedding. So 3 children definitely meant the end of school for them. You know that it didn't help either that 3 years later my mother found religion and went to follow a preacher, leaving her husband and children behind. Not knowing that she was pregnant with my father's last child, but I guess you can say she found forgiveness and salvation and felt no need to stick around. My grandma Wallace, feeling sorry for my dad and feeling like he needed some help, introduced him to his next wife, Emma Amelia Benson. She was a educator and 13 years older than my father. She made it known that she only married our father for the sake of us children. She had graduated from Atlanta University, where she had studied under W.E.B. Du Bois, and a very well known philosopher and historian, one of the greatest of all time. Her intention was to continue school at Columbia University, but she decided to take a different option and help my father, who needed help with all of the children. She took that money and helped him get a divorce and bought a brownstone on 7th Avenue and took care of us. It was stated that all of the real children were under one roof with a mother and a father. Ruby, Edward, Angelina, and Laverne, or like Edward soon pointed out to us, that all of our names spelled out the word real, R-E-A-L. I was a very young age when Emma came into our lives, and I did not know that she was not our real mother until I was 11 years old. I mean, we could feel some type of distance between us. She was never really the type whose arms you would run into. She was never really affectionate, never really hugged us or kissed us, or wasn't really playful. But I can say that I do believe she loved us in her own way. I recall once my sister Laverne and I, we were playing tea. We could see her sitting there watching us, just laughing. Then we saw her get up and go to the kitchen, and she came back with some goodies for us for the tea party.
Ruby, what was it like to be a child in the 1930s? And what was school like in the 1930s?
I can recall that due to job discrimination in the stores on 125th Street, which was the main shopping area of Harlem, people were protesting. There would be people on the street corners speaking and trying to educate the community about what's at stake if we keep supporting them. Once there was some excitement, I believe it was in 1935. I don't quite remember all of the details, but I do know that it was after a riot. There were people speaking over loudspeakers, going up and down 7th Avenue, repeating over and over, "Don't buy where you can't work." At any rate, tensions rose. Things got out of hand and people were injured and some people were even killed. There were many talks in our community about what the Negro has got to do. There would be rallies and they would try to raise money. People were hiding out for one reason or another. I do recall one time my father was trying to help a guy get train fare so that he could leave the town in the middle of the night. I thought to myself, I want my children and grandchildren to understand life isn't a bed of roses. Being a Negro can be dangerous, scary, and even very unpredictable. I went to public school 136 called Harriet Beecher Stowe. It was named after the author of Uncle Tom's Cabin. All the girls were uniform, white midi blouses and blue skirts with blue, red, or black ties, depending on your grade level. That made things kind of easy. You didn't have to worry about what you were going to wear, nor what people would think of what you were wearing. Most of the girls that grew up in my neighborhood that graduated from junior high school either went to Julia Richmond, Wadley, or an industrial or a commercial high school. Wasn't anything wrong with those schools, but they just did not demand nor offer much when it came to academic curriculum that would help you go to a reputable college. Unlike Hunter High School, which provided direct access to Hunter College. Miss Madeleine Henderson, a mother and educator who was very fair-skinned, learned through conversation with white parents who thought she was white as well, that the children in Harlem were being shortchanged. Miss Henderson had a master's degree in clinical psychology, and she was very active in all kinds of groups like the NAACP and the Urban League. She ended up forming a group of children that she would take downtown to solicit memberships and donations on the street. She felt driven to help out the inner city students who were being shunted. She helped make it possible for students at Public School 136 to take the entrance exam and be able to go to Hunter High School, a school that was very well known for its academic rigor and excellence. This opportunity would be provided for students on the rapid track. You would work hard to finish junior high school in 2 rather than 3 years, and then you would be able to take the test. Of course, I was among those students in the rapid classes. So in the fall of 1936, I did attend my first class at Hunter High School. I was impressed with both the students and the teachers. We learned to paint and draw, and as I expected, I did attend Hunter College.
How was life as a young adult venturing out into the world?
Well, everything seemed to be happening to me in the world around me all at once. In 1941, I married Frankie D. Brown, and He was a decent man with a good job, and he bought a two-family corner brownstone house on West 141st Street in Harlem. I felt lucky to be in my own lovely house with a backyard, but Frankie was never there because he traveled so much due to his job. I was enrolled in college, and I also had a job at Westington House in New Jersey. Through it all, I still managed to become more involved with the American Negro Theater, or ANT, as people would call it, appearing in one production annually, Starlight, in 1942, and Three's a Family in 1943. That was the year that I got my job on Broadway, playing a young Native girl in a drama called South Pacific. No relation to the later musical of the same name. I graduated from Hunter College in 1944 and took my first job as a translator. I worked for an import-export company, and I only worked a few short weeks before I got the role in Walk Hard. During this time, ANT was leaping into citywide and then nationwide prominence with its production of Anna LaCosta. In 1945, I had 4 major events happen in my life. Number one, although I had made an effort to maintain my marriage to Frankie, it did come to an end. I asked for a divorce in 1945, and he did finally agree and offered to pay for all of the legalities. We then went our separate ways. Number two, I came into a new level of myself as a woman. I had several suitors, and I discovered dimensions of myself I had never known. I moved from girlhood to womanhood, and I learned how little or how much I knew when it came to being a sexually fulfilled woman. 3, Franklin Delano Roosevelt died. For as long as I could remember, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was president. During 4 elections, black people had spoke so highly of him, his wife Eleanor, and Mary McLeod Bethune with such affection and hope. A black cabinet was formed, and Miss Bethune was appointed as the director of Negro Affairs of the National Youth Administration. The black cabinet was the informal term for a group of African Americans who served as public policy advisors to President Roosevelt and his wife during all of the terms while he was in office from 1933 to 1945. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or sometimes called FDR, what he did was he had taken people off of home relief, and he got them back to work. There were even programs and jobs for builders and artists and out-of-work actors and writers and many more creative people. I benefited greatly from that program, and I was blessed to receive training in radio theater as part of the National Youth Administration. Roosevelt encouraged the wealthy to accept responsibility. He injected capitalism with, compassion and common sense. The less fortunate folk knew that we had caring friends in the White House. In 1945, the country was stunned by his sudden death. And I can only imagine from how I felt that an unexpected devastation had hit the whole world. And four, last but not least, I worked with an actor that I had never heard of before, Ozzy Davis.
You know, a lot of people know the history of you and Ossie Davis, but can you tell us a little bit about your first impression of Ossie Davis when you met him?
Well, I started out as an understudy for the role of Libby, Ozzy's love interest in the Broadway show Jeb. William Marshall, the understudy for Ozzy, was a tall, regal-looking actor who had quite the sense of humor. We had decided that Ozzy surprisingly was a good actor, even though he looked like a country bumpkin. We felt he was innocent, good-natured, not too bright, and probably fresh from following a plow in a cotton patch. He was tall and gaunt and had a very distinct and Adam's apple. It would just move up and down. The clothes that he wore, they didn't seem to quite fit either. The jacket was, and the shirt was just too big, and the sleeves on him, well, they landed somewhere near his forearm, and his pants, well, they came nowhere near his ankle. We saw a skinny, tall guy dressed in the well-worn apparel of a short, fat guy. We both agreed that he probably bought his clothes from a secondhand store with his eyes shut. I must say, love took me by surprise. It was about a week or so later, and something very unsettling occurred as Bill and I sat watching the rehearsal. Ozzy was standing on stage and silently, slowly began tying his tie. I can remember a feeling, it was a very distinct, like, bolt of lightning and electric charge flashed between us. It was a marvelous sensation. And I can remember thinking to myself, he has got to feel it too. I later asked Ozzy, and he told me he hadn't felt a thing. Go figure. Ozzy and I had become very close and intimate friends by the time Jeb opened in New York. Between the two of us, neither one of us were extensively sexually experienced. I would say maybe I had a little bit more experience since I had been previously married, and those 2 adult films that I had watched might have taught me a little something as well. But Ozzy's father was never comfortable with us being together since I had been previously married. You see, he didn't believe in divorce, so in his eyes, he could never approve of me. Almost immediately after the closing notice was posted for Jeb, some people from the production of Anna LaCosta, one of the biggest hits on Broadway, came backstage to see Ozzy and I, and they offered us roles on the spot. We were extremely lucky. It had appeared that the company was throwing us together continuously. I guess there was no denying the chemistry between us. We were attracted to each other, and I guess we just decided to accept our fate. It was definitely permanent what was going on between us. So while Ozzy was in Chicago, he sent me a telegram proposing marriage. Now, I can't say it was the most romantic proposal, and it struck me that maybe he felt I was in need of being saved from myself. So, me being me, I called Ozzy and I said, well, okay, but don't do me no favors. Ozzy and I were hired for the film The Smile of the World, and I was the maid and Ozzy was the manservant. We had been so busy focusing on rehearsing, so when we finally got a Thursday off, we went right up to New Jersey to be married. In New York, you had to wait 3 days, but in New Jersey, you could do it that same day. So Ozzy had his brother Willie stand next to him, and I had my sister Laverne by my side. After taking the bus over to Jersey City, we found a Baptist preacher that could marry us. It was December 9th, 1948. Funny, neither one of us could remember the specifics of the best day of our lives and the most important day. I guess you could say everything was haze and vague. I guess it was just another insert into our busy schedule.
You and Ossie had a very busy life. And so tell us a little bit about how you dealt with parenthood and all the challenges that came along with it.
You could say we blinked and it was 1949. I was 26 years old, married, with no babies. Yes, we wanted some, but we were not having any luck. So both of us got checked out and found out that I was the one with the problem. Once everything got figured out and taken care of, several months later, I found out that I was with child. We were so pleased. And then it happened. We lost the baby. Words could not fill the void. I know that there were other women that had gone through this, but I felt like, how could such a horror be passed off as routine? 1950 came along, and that was the year of giving birth and being born. Despite my doctor's advice of us waiting a year, I found myself pregnant, and we had a beautiful baby girl on August 16th, 1950. I was so full of new baby, new challenges. I had to figure out how to relate to my baby as well as my husband. I also found myself struggling with how to keep my identity as well as answer the question, who am I? Marriage, I learned, is so full of contradictions. As a woman, we sometimes tell ourselves that we will demand respect, stand up for what we believe, be true to ourselves, and focus on self-preservation and the fact that I have earned my rights. But we soon find out that it's not always so easy. You get a dozen roses, a smile, a wink, a pat on the butt, and lo and behold, you are back blushing in the sack. You have just abandoned ship, and you are right back where you started. Next thing you know, you have several children. Life was moving right along and so fast, but as time went on, we got smarter. We took our children with us everywhere. The children never had to wonder what mom or dad was doing because they were with us at demonstrations and meetings, freedom dinners. I mean, we would bring them to it all. It was out of necessity. We never put work ahead of family.
So Ruby, when did you become an activist in the civil rights movement, and how did that occur?
Well, I never remember quite saying that I was going to become a member of the civil rights movement. I was fortunate to be a part of it. although it is what we call the dark age of racism in America. Blacks have always been true patriots. Though we were thrown into slavery and forced into labor, we have been true to our country still. We as black people went to war to fight for freedom and democracy, but when we returned home, we were still denied our rights. Yet we remain true. I can't say that I ever truly formally joined it. It was just born into me, and I did what I had to do. So you can say it's just always been a part of me. I truly believe that we make the path for those who are to come after us. That's what we are supposed to do as human beings. Make it easier for those to come after. I think that the clip that I brought with me would better explain what I'm trying to say. It's called The Psyche of Black America.
We came from slavery with the strength of true believers in our God, in our country, in our great documents. And we've tried to get a toehold to heal the old wounds and be made whole again. But America has met us with a false face, with a racism that has made rage the basic rhythm of our lives, a racism that has trampled self-esteem and numbed hope. Racism, that cancer on the bosom of our nation, that gnaws at the psyche of Black America and keeps us screaming and shaking for relief. It hands us upward mobility on rungless ladders, backdoor trap chutes to disillusionment and oblivion. Be patient, the country tells us. Be clean, be thrifty, be industrious, be. So we keep struggling for definitions, organizing, snatching at possibilities in the country, in the city, in the courts, on the streets, everywhere. But those who try to overcome, in spite of all, link us to survival, to hope, to ourselves. And so we must keep on telling the stories of our heroes and heroines, sung and unsung, as best we can, because it is they who urge us to hang on, to join hands, to move relentlessly toward greater understanding among all people, to move toward justice and toward love.
You know, I never thought of myself as an activist when we were coming along. I wasn't a joiner, you know. I love the people I love. I didn't care whether they could be Democrat, Republican, communist, you know. Anything but a racist.
Ruby, I heard you recite a poem that is said to be your anthem. Would you do the honor of reciting that poem for us today?
Oh, I would love to recite it. My good friend, Bea Richards, is the one that shared this poem with me, and the poem is by an unknown author. It's entitled Today. Today. It's something about that word, today. Today is ours. Let's live it. And love is strong. Let's give it. A song can help. Let's sing it. And peace is dear. Let's bring it. The past is gone. Don't rue it. Our work is here. Let's do it. Our world is wrong. Let's right it. the battle hard. Let's fight it. The road is rough. Let's clear it. The future vast. Don't fear it. Is faith asleep? Let's wake it. Today is ours. Let's take it.
In 2005, Ruby Dee suffered a tremendous loss when her husband, Ozzy Davis, died. Ruby was a widow for 9 years, and she continued to perform into her 90s. On June 11, 2014, Ruby Dee died of natural causes at her home in New Rochelle, New York. A memorial was held in her honor on September 20, 2014 at the Riverside Church in Upper Manhattan. So we close our program with this message. We must come to the point in our lives where love is more important than skin color or social class. May we all act in a way that will increase awareness as well as promote positive change. Thank you.